So, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't too sure how to go about making this video, but as a lot of you know, I just bought this. This is the iPhone XS. And I'm just gonna tell you right now, I love this phone. Now, real quick, I just wanna be clear, I do not care what you use. I'm not making this video as a way to try to convince you. This isn't about me being a shill or a fanboy. I'm not getting free iPhones or anything. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We've been getting free Android phones for years from Samsung, from OnePlus. In fact, Google just sent us the Pixel 3, and I still, the next day, went out and bought an iPhone with my own money. And it is really, really sad that I have to say this sort of stuff as sort of a disclaimer for this video. Like, it sucks that I know that I can't just share my opinion without some of you getting mad. I know I'm going to piss some of you off right now, or there's going to be a lot of people calling me mean names in the comments section. The tech community is a dumpster fire. Hey, I made that video too. Link in the description. So all I ask is that for this video only, you just set your emotions aside and hear me out. If you can't handle that, then leave. So iOS and I go way back. Like, I was an iPhone user for years. In fact, a little bit of a FPT throwback moment. 5 years ago, I put out a video called Why I Don't Like Android. Don't watch that video. It's a bad video. You might also remember a video that I did last year called Apple Sucks Now. And that video was mainly about the design direction of Apple. And I still believe most of the things that I said in that video, even a year later. Like, I'm not crazy about this hardware. There are definitely prettier phones out there. Well, I mean, I don't know. This gold's kind of nice. Anyway, I switched to Android in, I think, 2015. But here's the kicker. I never left the iPhone. I left iOS. I left because I was frustrated with the software. At the time, iOS was a colossal mess. Ever since iOS 7, Apple started tripping over themselves. Each new update to iOS introduced more bugs, and they were moving so fast trying to keep up with all of the new features of Android that they never took a step back to fix the problems that they kept creating, one update after another. I remember one time I held a Nexus 6. I don't know if you remember that monster of a phone, but when I held that and I got to experience stock Android, the stress that seemed to come with iOS, I didn't get on Android. Frustration. Frustration is the key to change. I never once looked at Android and saw some crazy new feature that I just had to have. I was never super impressed by the hardware either, the specs. I didn't care about any of that. In fact, what made me switch to Android was not Android. It was iOS, specifically my frustration with iOS. And you know what? If you think about it, frustration is usually what does create some sort of change in your life. You don't need to see something new to realize that you're just not happy with what you have. So I switched, and it was amazing. Android at the time was miles ahead of iOS, not just in terms of a feature set, but in terms of just pure user experience. It was more fluid, it looked better, it behaved better. Android was its own beast, and it was only getting better. But something happened between then and now. It seems, to me at least, that Android has lost its way. Like, it doesn't know what it wants to be or what it's supposed to be. If I had to boil how I feel about Android or my problems with Android, if I had to boil it down to one word, that one word would be inconsistency. It just does not feel like anyone making Android even actually cares anymore. I mean, we care, right? As a community, we care, and that's all fine and good, but it's starting to feel like we care more than they care. It's gotten way too far from Google. It's gotten too far away from them. It doesn't feel like Google even knows what they're doing or how to regain control of the platform. With fines from the EU and other Android OEMs running amok with confusing hardware, it feels like Google is having an internal struggle. And I just don't see this getting fixed. Android is going to continue to get further and further and further away from itself until Google does one of two things. Number one, they reel this bitch the fuck back in. They take back control. They start licensing as many aspects as they possibly can. Or two, they let it go. Project Fuchsia is a thing, and it's a thing that I'm actually super excited for. I want something built from the hands of Google from the ground up. I want to experience something that Google actually believes in. I mean, I thought we would get that with the Pixel line. We get to experience Android in the way that Google intended it, but I'm not sure we got that either. Everything just feels so gross and uncontrolled. And I get it. But John, you can customize it. You can make it any way you want it. Yeah. Fuck off. The solutions to the problems with the software, problems with the hardware should never, ever have to be answered by me, the consumer. The burden should never be placed on the consumer. That would be like a car manufacturer giving us a car without any wheels. Because, you know, if you want to make this 2-ton hunk of metal move, I mean, figure it out. Customize it. Make it the way you want it. So we've established that it feels like Google doesn't care anymore on a software level. But what about the hardware? The Android OEMs in the game currently, they care, right? Fuck no, they don't. Look at these phones. Look at them. All of these phones look like the iPhone 10. No one made phones that looked like this until the iPhone 10 came out. And don't even start with the fucking essential phone bullshit. You know that the phones you're looking at right now were made to look like the iPhone 10. So I already had an issue with the iPhone 10 hardware design, but then I quickly ran out of choices on the Android side of things because they all started to make their own fancy iPhone 10 clone. And why in the fuck would I buy an iPhone 10 clone, an Android phone that looks like an iPhone, if I can just turn around and buy the real fucking thing? A lot of people like to talk about how cheap Android phones are. How much more affordable Android phones are compared to, well, the iPhone. Those same people will just mock the price of the iPhone and the people that are willing to buy them. Because y'all have a problem with weighing value against hardware outright. You pay for the specs. What do I get for the money that I pay? How many gigabytes of RAM? How many pixels can you shove from that display straight into my eye holes for $500? But that is an extremely shallow argument. The real value for me is user experience. How does the device make me feel when I use it? A lot of Android manufacturers do not care because they don't have to. Why would they? They don't even make the software. I mean, sure, a lot of them slap a shitty skin or theme on top of Android, maybe add a couple more features, but the core of the software is done. It is made for them. And half the time, you won't even end up with the latest version of the software that they did not make because they do not care. And if they don't have to put cares or effort into the software, why would they put cares or effort into the hardware? I mean, the iPhones are selling, right? So let's just do that. Let's make the iPhone, but like cheaper and shittier. And then we'll put it out to the public and maybe they'll buy it and we'll make some money off of it. I'm not speaking for all the Android OEMs right now, but let's be honest, like 90% currently. It sucks. It's sad in a way, if you think about it. Android has lost its way. And you know what? I'm done waiting for somebody to bring it back. So I'm leaving Android. For the same reason that I left iOS years ago. Frustration. It just so happens that at the time that I felt done with Android, Apple became more self-aware. Well, as much as Apple can, at least. They started to refine iOS, the one thing that made me leave the iPhone. They took a step back this year, and instead of focusing on crazy new features to keep up with Android, they stopped. They cleaned the whole software experience up. They optimized it a lot. They cleared out a lot of bugs, though not all of them, but most of them. Most of the issues that I had with iOS back in the day, well, they don't exist now. I bought this iPhone, and within the first hour, it felt like things just made more sense. The hardware, the software, the entire user experience, it felt like somebody somewhere actually cared. It feels like finally I, the user, was actually considered top to bottom as they made this device. Almost everything about the software experience, the experience of this phone as a whole, makes sense. Like, things that I tried to talk myself out of and be like, no, that doesn't make sense. It's better the other way, better the Android way. Things like the gesture controls with these new phones. I was really iffy about the gestures and the current behavior of iOS. But my God, intuitive is not the right word at all. That would be an understatement. It feels like this is how I should have been using phones all along. Like for years. The gesture control, this is how I should be talking at this thing. Communicating with iOS does not feel like a one-way street. And that's how I felt on Android. For some reason, this OS makes me feel like it's working with me to make sure I get the shit that I need to get done. There aren't 4 different weird duplicate apps all doing the same thing. There's nothing in my way. There's no weird workarounds. There's no solutions to the software problems that I have to come up with on my own. None of that. Everything I need is a swipe or tap away. And I am not saying that everything about this is perfect, because it ain't. Like, for one, Siri sucks a bunch of honky-tonky donkey dick. Like, I don't know if you've used Siri lately, but she's terrible. Not even from the level of intelligence. Like, I get it. Because of user privacy and the way Apple does things, Siri is limited in terms of what she can do for you or what she knows. That's all well and good. I'm talking about the actual quality of even like the voice recordings. Have you listened to Siri? Have you listened to Siri on like a good set of speakers? It sounds like absolute dog shit. Brian was with me when I got this phone, and on our way back home from the Apple store, we're in the car, and that was like my first time talking to Siri. I just wanted her to play some music, and I got into an awful shouting match with this robot that sounded like shit and couldn't do anything for me. Siri, fuck off, you suck. Anyway, if you haven't caught on yet, I for sure have issues with the iPhone. I for sure have issues with iOS. It's not perfect. But you know what? At the end of the day, none of those issues have me frustrated. I'm not frustrated with this device. In fact, the iPhone, iOS right now, is a pleasure to use. The real power is in simplicity. And that is why I switched.